This video will prepare you for every subject in the Praxis Elementary Education exam. If you want to guarantee you'll pass, check out our full-length study guide here or in the description below. Let's get into it.
This video is going to prepare you for the Reading and Language Arts portion of the Praxis Elementary Education Multiple Subjects exam. And this video is going to cover three things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most important concepts to master, and we're going to look at a few practice questions. In the reading category, you'll need to know about foundational reading skills and literature and informational texts. 38 questions come from this category, making it worth 47% of your exam. You'll basically have two styles of questions in this category. The first style consists of questions that assess your knowledge of teaching students reading. This includes things like phonological awareness, phonics, word analysis, fluency, and comprehension. The other style consists of questions that assess your reading skills. For these, you'll read a passage and answer one or more questions about it. Okay, let's get into it. I'm going to tell you the most important things to know for this category. It's almost like I'm making you an anchor chart. So grab your flare pens and grab your chart paper and let's get to work. One topic that's likely to come up is phonological awareness, or the ability to hear individual words, syllables, and sounds in spoken language. So it's a good idea to review all the skills that fall under that umbrella term. Another big idea to be familiar with is measures of fluency. So if you're not sure exactly what the difference is between accuracy, prosody, and speed, you should brush up on those. Oh, what the heck? Why don't we go ahead and take care of that now? Let's take a peek inside our study guide.
Accuracy is the reader's ability to correctly pronounce words as they appear in the text. To be a truly fluent reader, students must accurately pronounce words with automaticity, the ability to read words effortlessly. For example, a student may spend a significant amount of time decoding words to have strong accuracy, but this would lower their speed. They need automaticity to read fluently. Prosody is the reader's ability to convey expression. Students with strong prosody use appropriate phrasing and emphasis. Their expression matches the tone of the passage. They adhere to punctuation. Speed is the pace at which the reader reads the text. Students who read at an appropriate speed are easily understood because their reading is not too fast or too slow. It's just right. Teachers keep track of students' WPM, the number of words they can read correctly in 1 minute, to determine if they are reading with the appropriate speed.
If you like to learn with videos, we have plenty of them in our study guide. Okay, let's dive into another big topic from this category: main idea and primary purpose. One of the most important things you can do when working with a reading passage is identify the main idea and primary purpose of the text. Simply put, the main idea is the point, the primary purpose is the why. So for example, if I write a short essay on how to make the perfect fruit smoothie, my main idea is giving you the recipe for the smoothie, and my primary purpose is to get you to make me one. Okay, focus. So you'll need to know how to find the main idea and primary purpose of passages. Need practice on this? There are certain parts of a passage that often contain main idea clues. We call them bookends. It's helpful to reread the bookends to figure out the main idea. If the passage is a single paragraph, check the first and last sentences for main idea clues. Oh, and here's a good tip. If the passage is multiple paragraphs, check the first and last sentences of the first and last paragraphs for main idea clues. And remember, you will have to expand upon the main idea and purpose to answer some questions. For those, you'll have to identify supporting ideas, interpret elements of character, setting, and plot, pick the best summary, determine the theme, identify author attitude. The list goes on. If only there was someone who had created tips and examples of each of these skills, and maybe had them all available as videos. Just saying. We made it through the first category. Remember our flare pens and chart paper? Let's imagine that we're flipping that paper over to a fresh sheet and move on to category 2. Category 2 covers writing, speaking, and listening. It's worth 53% of your exam, so expect to answer around 43 questions from this category. Again, you'll see two different question styles here. Questions that want to know if you can teach writing, and questions to see if you can work with writing. You won't have to actually write anything. This test is all selected response, but you will have to choose answers that edit writing or revise it for improvement. One topic you'll likely see on your exam is writing types and contexts. There are 3 main types of writing: narrative, persuasive, and informative. Each of the 3 main types of writing has its own purpose, audience, organization, and style choices associated with it. If you're not quite sure about those features, you need to get the 240 study guide. The other big topic you'll need to know here is more of a skill called revise reading. This just means that if you're given a passage, can you make changes to improve the writing? In this video, I'm going to focus on revising reading. But afterwards, if you still have questions about any of this, ask me in the comments. I'm going to be watching the comment section, and I'm here to help. And while you're there, help me settle a debate with my coworker: Crayola or Rose Art crayons? I think we all know the answer. So you may need to revise a reading passage. You'll read a short passage and make changes to improve organization, remove unnecessary information, or improve clarity. When editing a piece, consider these factors: reorganizing to create a logical flow. Check the writing to ensure that sentences and paragraphs build on each other in the best order. Remove details that do not support the main idea. For example, a paragraph discussing the invention of the smallpox vaccine might not need details about the invention of antibiotics. Remove details that are relevant but distract from the main idea. If the entire paragraph was about sharks as ocean predators, a sentence about the movie Jaws would most likely be an unnecessary supporting detail, even though it seems on topic. Choose new vocabulary to eliminate redundant or wordy descriptions. Remove multiple descriptive words if 1 or 2 more precise terms will do. And finally, you may need to edit phrases for consistency in style or tone. The good news is the question should point you in the direction of what you should be editing for. And you'll be given choices, so you're not having to come up with the changes without any guidance. Oh, and this is always a good idea. After you've picked an answer, be sure to check it by rereading the passage with the change to make sure it sounds right. If you're still a little unsure about any of this, use the 240 study guide. It'll save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of worry. And remember, all our guides come with a money-back guarantee. Now that we've gone over a big concept in each of our 2 areas, let's look at some practice questions to show you how those concepts can appear on the test. And if you want a lot of practice questions, you can click the free practice test below. At the end, you get a score report on how well you did on the test, so you'll know where to focus your energy as you study. Now for questions. Remember for the reading category I told you about identifying the main idea? Let's look at how that's reflected in a question. When you come suddenly upon the porcupine in his native haunts, he draws his head back and down, puts up his shield, trails his broad tail, and waddles slowly away. His shield is the bundle of larger quills upon his back, which he opens and spreads out in a circular form so that the whole body is quite hidden beneath it. The porcupine's great chisel-like teeth, which are quite as formidable as those of the woodchuck, he does not appear to use at all in his defense. He relies entirely upon his quills, and when those fail him, he is done for. Which of the following best explains the main idea of the passage? The defense mechanisms of the porcupine, the habitat of the porcupine, the eating habits of the porcupine, the comparison of the woodchuck's defenses versus the porcupine's? This is the correct answer. This main idea is a description of how the porcupine defends itself. Let's look at one more. This one is about identifying the primary purpose. Practically everyone has heard of Helen Keller. She overcame many hardships and challenges to become the admired figure she is today. Helen Keller was born in 1880 in Tuscumbia, Alabama, into a modest household. Keller was born without any health issues, and her parents and siblings were overjoyed. Only 19 months old, she was left deaf and blind by illness. Keller's main teacher was Anne Sullivan. She taught Keller to read Braille. Keller went on to publish 12 books and several articles. She is the first deaf-blind person to earn a bachelor's degree. Next time you think about what you can't do, think about Helen Keller. She overcame so much to accomplish what she did. She died on June 1st, 1968. This excerpt was written with which of the following goals in mind? To inform the reader about the life of the first deaf-blind woman to earn a bachelor's degree, to entertain the reader with what one can accomplish if they seek happiness, to inspire the reader with the incredible life and accomplishments of Helen Keller, to argue that Helen Keller was one of the most accomplished women of the last decade. I thought at first that this was the answer, but the question feedback from 240 would tell me that while there is information in the excerpt, the author has a larger goal of inspiring the reader. This is seen in the word choice present in the last paragraph. So this is the correct choice. This excerpt is meant to inspire the reader with Helen Keller's ability to overcome her challenges and achieve many accomplishments. Now, let's look at a question from the second category, writing, speaking, and listening. Henry VIII had faults which have been trumpeted about the world from his own day to ours. But of all English sovereigns, he stands foremost as the monarch of the sea. Young, handsome, learned, exceedingly accomplished, gloriously strong in body and in mind, Henry mounted the throne in 1509 with the hearty goodwill of nearly all his subjects. Happily for herself and for her future colonists, Henry was richly endowed with strength and skill for his task. Before England could become the mother country of an empire overseas, she had to shake off her medieval weaknesses, become a strongly unified modern state, and arm herself against any probable combination of hostile foreign states. With one hand, he welded England into political unity, crushing disruptive forces by the way. With the other, he gradually built up a fleet the like of which the world had never seen. Which of the following is the best way to combine sentences 6 and 7? With one hand, he welded England into political unity, crushing disruptive forces by the way. With the other, he gradually built up a fleet the like of which the world had never seen. This is the correct answer. It's best to connect these sentences using the coordinating conjunction and because they describe achievements that work together. Remember when I said you'll see two different question styles in the writing, speaking, and listening category? That was a work with writing question. Here's a teach writing question. Mrs. Tockert assigns a 4-paragraph essay asking the students to write about a favorite memory associated with a favorite season. The rubric requests that at least 5 sensory details be included in each paragraph. Which type of writing will the students be doing? Expository, narrative, descriptive, persuasive. Descriptive is the correct answer because students will be expected to describe the memory using sensory language and descriptive details. No story elements are expected outside of those necessary to explain the memory. Now that's just a small sampling of practice questions to give you an idea about how these concepts are assessed on the test. Congratulations on finishing the video. If you found it helpful, give it a like. There's still plenty more to learn. This video is going to prepare you for the math portion of the Praxis Elementary Education Multiple Subjects exam. Ready? Let's go. Now, the Praxis Elementary Education Mathematics subtest consists of 3 overarching categories. The categories are numbers and operations, algebraic thinking, and the super wordy, couldn't they think of a way to shorten it, geometry and measurement, data, statistics, and probability. Really? I have a tough time believing that's the best title they could come up with. Each category has an outline of what to expect in that category. But as you'll see here in a minute, they're still pretty overwhelming. Thankfully, we've done the research for you, and you can find exactly what you need to know in our study guide. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the key concepts now. The first category we'll look at is number 1, since it's worth the largest chunk of your exam at 40%. This means you'll see about 20 questions on your test come from this section. Should I have asked you to figure out what 40% of 50 was? How do you like a little math primer before the math section? The big things you're going to see here include understanding number theory, operations, and fractions and ratios. I know some of those titles might still be a little intimidating, but we'll translate them from math language and break down what you really need to know. Starting with number theory. Number theory basically refers to your ability to understand what a number represents. So questions on place value show up in this section a lot. That means you'll need to understand a place value chart like this one, and the value each digit within a larger number holds. For example, the digit 7 appears in each of these 3 numbers, but it holds a different value in each. In 5,237, 7 is in the ones place and has the value of 7. In 7,852, 7 is in the thousands place and has a value of 7,000. And in 82 and 47 thousandths, 7 is in the thousandths place and has a value of 0.007. Let's take a look at operations. Since you already know the value of each number, now you need to know what to do with them. So basically, you're going to need to know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and use parentheses and exponents. You're going to need to do it in the right order. Remember PEMDAS? And you'll need to be able to do all of those things with all real numbers. So that includes fractions, decimals, and negative numbers. And if that sounds like a lot, you should check out our study guide where we help you through all of it. Let me show you an example from our study material of a problem type you're likely to see on your test. Simplify this expression. See, here's PEMDAS, front and center. We use PEMDAS to know which order we need to follow as we work through the problem to make sure we get the right answer. Need help remembering the order of PEMDAS? There are lots of mnemonic devices out there, but a popular one is, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Last one in this category, fractions and ratios. So yeah, you'll need to know about fractions and ratios, but also about decimals and percents, and how to convert between them. So if you're given a fraction, you need to be able to convert it into a decimal that represents the same value. Ooh, want to see how we teach this concept in our study guide? Let's check out one of our super helpful videos.
Let's say a problem states that there are 2 chocolate chip cookies and 3 sugar cookies in a jar. You could represent this using part-to-part comparisons. For example, 2 to 3 means that for every 2 chocolate chip cookies, there are 3 sugar cookies. Or you could do the inverse, 3 to 2. For every 3 sugar cookies, there are 2 chocolate chip cookies. We could also make part-to-whole comparisons. The whole is 2 chocolate chip cookies plus 3 sugar cookies equals 5 total cookies. For example, 2 to 5 would mean for every 5 cookies, 2 are chocolate chip. 2 over 5 is the same, just expressed as a fraction. It can be divided to form a decimal or converted to a percent. 40% of the cookies are chocolate chip.
Like what you saw? Then you should subscribe to the 240 Study Guide to get a ton more where that came from. Let's keep it moving on to algebra. Algebra is worth 30% of your exam. So 30%, that's 0.3 times the 50 questions, 15. So about 15 questions on your exam will come from category 2. The entire algebra category deals with algebraic expressions and equations. So first, you'll need to be able to evaluate and manipulate them, then you'll actually solve them. Finally, you'll look for patterns in the expressions and equations. Let's start with evaluating and manipulating. And let's pick out a skill that comes up on this portion of the exam a lot. Here we go. Sometimes you'll get a scenario and you'll need to come up with an equation that represents the scenario. Maria uses 1/4 of a stick of butter for each recipe of muffins she makes. If she makes 18 batches of muffins this month, how many sticks of butter will she use? Write the correct computation to solve the problem. You need to pick out keywords and phrases that help you build this equation. One of the things that will really help you with this section is knowing what keywords to look out for and what they mean. This is just a small sampling of words you could see in your test questions. We've got a lot more of those for you to check out in our study guide. Now that you know how to put equations and expressions together, let's take a look at how to solve them. Here's a quick tip for you. Most of this can be boiled down to one rule. Whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, do to the other side too. Let's see what that looks like.
Solve for x in the equation 3 times the quantity of x minus 4 plus 10 equals 13. Start with simplification. Since x and 4 are not like terms, the parentheses cannot be simplified as the first step. Instead, multiply by applying the distributive property. Now we combine like terms, the -12 and the +10 to get -2. Now isolate x. First, add 2 to both sides. Then divide both sides by 3. This leaves us with x equals 5. Remember, according to the properties of equality, the two expressions remain equal to each other as long as you do the same thing to both sides. Last, check the solution in the original equation by using substitution. Make sure to use parentheses to avoid sign issues. Then simplify. Since both sides simplify to the same value, 13, the value of x we found is correct.
We found x, but not that one x who made you pay for dates and ghosted you. We're never finding them again. Time to finish off algebra with patterns. A big thing here is to use the patterns you find in a set of numbers to identify the slope of a line. So you might see a function table like this one. You need to figure out the pattern to determine how much x and y are changing. In this case, the x column, the values increase by 1 every time, and in the y column, the values decrease by 2 every time. Then we can use the formula change in y over change in x to determine the slope of this line. So -2/1 or -2. But remember, this is just one type of pattern you may be asked to identify. So to really get the confidence you deserve, check out our study guide. The last category on the list is that mouthful dealing with geometry and statistics. This category is dense. There is a ton packed into it, and it'll fill out the remaining 30% of your exam questions. But that still means around 15 questions will come from this category, so you'll want to be prepped for this one too. Lucky for you, that's just what I'm here to do. This category breaks down into 4 smaller chunks, and each one of these chunks still has a ton of information in it. We'll still pick out one super important nugget from each that you're likely to see on your test. In the shapes section, you're going to need to know your basic shapes and the rules that govern each of them, like the formulas for finding different measurements within a known shape. So if you're given a shape and its outside measurements, you may be asked to solve for the area or perimeter. Let's try to find the area of this shape. We can split this shape into a triangle and a rectangle. From there, we can use known formulas to solve for each. The area of a rectangle is length times width. So in this case, 6 times 4, or 24. Then the triangle is 1/2 times base times height. So 1/2 times 6 times 2, or 6. Add them both together and the area of this shape is 30 centimeters squared. And here's the thing, in our study guide, we've got this information in the graphic you just saw, and we also have that same info in a video, so you can choose how you want to study. Ready to see how we measure up in measurement? A big one here is learning to estimate measures like weight and length, and choosing the appropriate units. It helps to have some real-world equivalents to compare to, like the ones we provided you here. So if someone asks you the height of a classroom, you'd likely measure it in meters. Millimeters, centimeters, and kilometers just wouldn't make sense, because your answer would be either really large or really small. Statistics and probability is next. Now, these are 2 words that are usually pretty intimidating, but don't worry, we've got this. A lot of what you'll see here are the measures of central tendency. So we're talking mean, median, mode, and range. Need a quick refresher here? Sounds like a great opportunity for another peek into our study guide.
The mean is more commonly known as the average. It is often represented by the Greek letter mu and is calculated by dividing the sum of the terms by the number of terms. To find the median, start by ordering the numbers from least to greatest. In a set that has an odd number of terms, the median is the middle value of that set. When there is an even number of terms, the median is found by calculating the mean of the middle 2 numbers. The mode is the term that occurs most frequently in a data set. Some sets of data have no mode. This occurs when all terms share the same frequency. Some sets of data have more than one mode. This happens when multiple pieces of data in a set appear the same number of times and appear more than any other data values. The range is the difference between the highest data value and the lowest data value. In general, the greater the range, the more spread out the data is. The smaller the range, the more it clusters together.
Wow, I just love a good educational video. And at the end when she explained range, get it together, Emma. We've still got data to talk about. In this one, you're going to see a lot of, you guessed it, data. You might be given a data set and asked what type of graph or chart would be best to display the data. Or you might be given a completed graph or chart and asked to interpret it. For instance, you may be shown a graph like this one and asked, which type of movie is the most popular among children? First, make sure you know what you're looking at. Then, read the chart. And that's it. We've gone through all the categories. Here's my time to plug the 240 study guide. Teachers have so much on their plate. Don't make yourself worry about your test. Use 240 to guarantee you pass. Now that we've gone over some of the big concepts in our 3 areas, let's look at some practice questions to show you how those concepts can appear on the test. Remember way back in the beginning of the video when we talked about place value? Let's look at how that's reflected in a question. What is the value of the 7 in the number 432 and 769 10,000ths? The 7 is the second number after the decimal, so it has the value of 7 hundredths, or 7 divided by 100. So this is the correct answer. How about PEMDAS? Simplify the expression. Parentheses are addressed first, so the first step in this problem is to perform the subtraction of 6 minus 2 equals 4. From there, the problem becomes 200 minus 3 times 4 to the 3rd power plus 10. Exponents should be handled next. In this case, 4 is raised to the third power, resulting in 200 minus 3 times 64 plus 10. Multiplication of the 3 with 64 must be completed before subtraction or addition can occur, leaving 200 minus 192 plus 10. Subtraction and addition are to be simplified in the order in which they appear from left to right. So, 200 minus 192 is 8. Add that to the 10 and we have 18. So choice A is correct. Now let's look at one where you need to convert. A class is learning about ratios and percentages. The teacher tells the class that at last Friday night's football game, there were between 800 and around 1,000 people. Of those at the football game, about 13 to 17% of the people had blonde hair. Which of the following is the most reasonable estimate of the number of people at the football game with blonde hair? We start by using 15%, the average number of 13% and 17%, as the percentage estimate. So 15% of 800 people would be 120, and 15% of 1,000 people would be 150 people. It's reasonable to estimate that between 120 and 150 people at the football game had blonde hair. 135 is the only number that fits within this range, so this is the best choice. 1 category down, 2 to go. Moving into algebra. What about those evaluating and manipulating questions? What do those look like? Maria baked 6 dozen cookies for her classmates. There are 28 students in her class. Each child received 2 cookies, and Maria gave 6 cookies each to her teacher and her principal. Which expression shows the number of cookies she had left over? The 6 times 12 gives us the total number of cookies in 6 dozen, which is what Maria is starting with. Then we need to determine how many she's giving away. Then if each child receives 2, and there are 28 children, 2 times 28. If the teacher and the principal each receive 6, that's another 6 times 2. So we have 6 times 12 minus the quantity of 2 times 28 added to 2 times 6. So this is the best choice. Nice. Now let's do one where we solve for a variable. Solve for A. Remember, this is one of those where whatever you do to one side, you need to do to the other side as well. The correct answer is A equals 10. Last up in the algebra category is patterns. What is the equation for a pattern consisting of the points 1, 5, 2, 8, and 3, 11? Our x values increase by 1, and our y values increase by 3. So 3 over 1 is 3. How you doing? Hanging in there? One more category to go. Here comes a question on shapes. What is the area in square units of the figure pictured? Just like the example we looked at earlier, we can break this into 2 smaller shapes, a triangle and a rectangle. The rectangle has sides of 5 and 4 to get an area of 20 units squared. The triangle has a base of 4 and a height of 3 to get an area of 6 units squared. Finally, we add the 2 areas together to get 26 units squared. So this answer is the best one. Next up is measurement. Which of the following is the best estimate for the height of a 1-story house? The height of a 1-story house is on average 4.5 meters, or about 15 feet long. So choice B is best. Let's look at a question on statistics. The number of inches of snowfall in Selbyville is graphed in the bar chart below. What is the mean number of inches of snowfall per month from November to March? To find the mean, we need to add up all values and divide by the number of values in the data set. So 5 plus 7 plus 9 plus 8 plus 1, which equals 30. There are 5 data points, so 30 divided by 5 gives us 6. So this one is correct. Let's bring it home with a data question. The circle graph shows the results of a survey of 150 students. How many students chose basketball as their favorite sport? This problem gives us survey data, a pie chart, and asks how many students chose basketball as their favorite sport. I see an 8% in the wedge for basketball, so I'm going to pick that choice. Aw, rats, that seemed too easy. Let's take a step back and try again. Since 150 students were asked, the percentage doesn't equal the number of students. Instead, we need to multiply the percentage by the total, so 8% times 150. For the first 100 students, 8% equals 8 students. For the remaining 50, 8% equals 4 students. This means 12 students total. Whew, Now that's just a small sliver of practice questions to give you an idea about how these concepts are assessed on your test. Congratulations on finishing the video. If you found it helpful, give it a like. There's still plenty more to learn. This video is going to prepare you for the social studies portion of the Praxis Elementary Education Multiple Subjects exam. You ready to knock this test out of the park? Batter up. Now, the Praxis Elementary Education Social Studies subtest consists of 3 categories that actually put multiple categories together, but you'll see what I mean. The categories are United States History, Government, and Citizenship, Geography, Anthropology, and Sociology, and World History and Economics. Each category has test specifications listed under it to give you a better idea of what to study. Thankfully, we've done the research for you, and you can find exactly what you need to know in the full 240 study guide. But let's go ahead and talk about some key concepts now. The first competency we'll look at is Category 1, since it's worth the largest chunk of your exam at 45%. This means approximately 27 of the 60 total questions will come from this category. I know we're not talking about math in this video, but that's almost half. We'll discuss a key concept of the Civil War, and then one of government and citizenship. There are 5 test specifications that cover U.S. history. Not too bad, right? Let's take a closer look. Knows the major events and developments in United States history from founding to present. That's over 200 years worth of events and developments. And this is a little helpful, but I'm pretty sure more than these 3 things have happened in the U.S. since 1776. Now, you could go dust off your old U.S. history textbook, or you could subscribe to the 240 study guide, where we've done the hard work for you. You can study with flashcards, practice quizzes, and videos, like this one we'll take a look at about the Civil War, an event that is highly likely to appear on your exam.
South Carolina chose to secede from the Union anyway, starting the Civil War. Mississippi seceded shortly after, followed by Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Delegates from the seceded states elected Jefferson Davis of Mississippi as the President of the Confederate States of America. The northern states had clear advantages in a more industrialized economy and a larger population from which to recruit a greater number of military personnel. The North also had a stronger navy and could sustain trade during the war while blockading Confederate ports. The advantage of the Confederate Army was its superior military leadership from Robert E. Lee. At the beginning of the war, the Army also had the support of Great Britain, who relied on Southern cotton to feed its massive textile industry. The South had men who had grown up shooting and hunting and were familiar with the land on which they fought. In addition, the Confederate men tended to fight harder since they were on their own homeland.
And there's much more to this lesson. We all know how the war turned out, but to drill into the details, subscribe to a 240 study guide. Okay, let's move on to something important to know from the government and citizenship portion of this category. Federalism is a system of shared power between the national government and the states. There are differences in the powers of the national and state governments, but some powers do overlap, and you gotta know which is which, along with the effects of the system. All right, let's get into our next category. Category 2 is worth 30% of your exam. This means that there are around 18 questions that cover geography, anthropology, and sociology. Let's stick to our pattern and highlight a key concept from the geography portion, and then one on anthropology and sociology. For the geography questions that you'll see, it's important to know where major land and water areas are located, not just so you can pick out where to go on your next beach vacation, but it's also important to understand how the environment affects humans, and the other way around too. In simple terms, humans respond to their environments. They might even move because of it. Fun fact, before 1900, every city founded was located near some sort of water source, sometimes oceans, sometimes rivers. When asked about human settlement, water is often a key factor. Well, why water? For starters, humans need fresh water to drink. Also, water was the easiest and most efficient form of transportation. You gotta be able to move goods in and out of the city. And water is just one example of how humans adapted their behavior to respond to their environment. If you want to see more, check out our study guide. Let's move on to another key concept from this category, cultural diffusion. We'll start by focusing on culture. Geographers describe places not only by their physical characteristics, but also by their people and cultures. Culture is composed of cultural traits, which are individual aspects of human activity that shape the social life of a place. These traits include daily routines and practices, food, language, art, and religion. Culture continually changes as societies encounter new challenges and influences, both external and internal. Okay, here's that term we've been waiting for. Cultural diffusion is the process by which cultural traits spread from one group to another. For example, baseball is considered an American sport, but is played in Canada, and hockey is considered a Canadian sport, but is played in America. The culture of the two sports diffused across the shared border. All right, one category to go. The World History and Economics category is worth the smallest portion at 25%. But that still means around 15 questions will come from this category, so you'll want to be prepped for this one too. Lucky for you, that's just what I'm here to do. A lot can come up about world history, including information on the classical civilizations like Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Now, I'm about to go over some essential things you should know about ancient Rome. But to really get the confidence you deserve to pass the test, you need to get the 240 study guide. Our 240 study guides have hundreds of questions, in-depth videos, and test-aligned study materials, so you can get the depth you need to pass. But let's get back to ancient Rome. The Roman Empire began to form in late 200 BCE. The Roman Empire began as a republic, also known as a representative government, and rose to a dominant empire in 2 centuries. The Romans were heavily influenced by their Greek neighbors in the fields of philosophy, science, and religion. Rome was both militarily and economically strong due to its geography. The Alps provided winter protection, deterring invaders from Europe. The Apennine Mountains provided not only protection, but also natural resources. The Po and Tiber river valleys produced extremely fertile soil. This allowed Romans to grow many different crops and to have a surplus of crops to trade with other societies. The location on the Mediterranean Sea allowed easy access to trade. The wealth gained from trade allowed the Romans to expand their military strength. Well, I can't think of a great segue from ancient Rome to scarcity and opportunity cost, but world history and economics are together in one category, so here you go. One of the most important economic concepts to understand for your exam is scarcity and opportunity cost. No one can have everything they want. The gap between resources available and what you'd want is called scarcity. Since people have to make choices, opportunity cost comes into play. This is the cost of the next best opportunity a person gives up when they make a choice. Although we most naturally associate economics with money, time is actually the most important resource to consider when thinking about opportunity cost. For example, when choosing to study for a certification exam instead of taking a nap, the opportunity cost is missing out on rest. But I definitely think you should do both. Your brain needs time to process all the important information you're working through. And again, to make sure you're working with the best, most test-aligned material out there, subscribe to a 240 study guide. Now that we've gone over some of the big concepts from our 3 categories, let's look at some practice questions to show you how those concepts can appear on the test. If you want a lot of practice questions, you can click the free practice test link below. At the end, you get a score report on how well you did on the test, so you'll know where to train your focus as you study. Let's look at a question about American history. We discussed the Civil War earlier, but let's go back in time even further, to the colonial period. The American colonies eventually settled into distinct groups based on geography and economic pressures. Which group of colonies became known as the breadbasket for their high production of wheat? The correct answer is the middle colonies, because they had fertile soil for farming, and were nicknamed the breadbasket because of the large amounts of grain they produced. However, if you thought the answer was the New England colonies, the quiz feedback within our study guide would let you know why that answer is incorrect and what those colonies were known for. Cool, right? It's a great interactive way to study. Okay, let's take a look at a government question. Which of the following U.S. documents states that the purpose of government includes the establishing of justice and securing the blessings of liberty? Look, we have a big clue in our question prompt. We know we're looking for a U.S. document, which means we can eliminate the Magna Carta, which was written in England. The rest of our choices are U.S. documents that are important to know, but the Constitution is what we're looking for here. Let's see a question from Category 2, shall we? Which of the following factors is most likely to encourage initial human settlement in an area? Out of our choices, abundant natural resources is best. Like I told you, water is important. All right, let's see a question on world history. We touched on ancient Rome before, but how about ancient Egypt? Which of the following contributed to the Egyptian civilization's comparative success during the Bronze Age? Select all that apply. Our two correct choices here are B and C. The natural fortification of Egypt, due to being surrounded by deserts and the Mediterranean Sea, allowed Egypt to focus on technological advancements instead of military strategy. Also, the Nile River helped with farming and therefore food supply. There's that water talk again. Let's finish up with a question about economics. Which of the following identifies the situation faced by two consumers, both of whom want to purchase a single available copy of a novel at their local bookstore? Surplus, embargo, market equilibrium, or scarcity? Our correct answer is the term we discussed earlier, scarcity. This is an example of a resource, in this case the novel, being limited. Now that's just a small sliver of practice questions to give you an idea about how these concepts are assessed on the test. Congratulations on finishing the video! If you found it helpful, give it a like. There's still so much more to learn. This video is going to prepare you for the science portion of the Praxis Elementary Education Multiple Subjects exam. Ready? Let's go. Now, the Praxis Elementary Education Science subtest consists of 3 overarching categories. The categories are Earth Science, Life Science, and Physical Science. Each category has an outline of what to expect in that category, but as you'll see in a minute, they try to get a little tricky here. The last 4 specifications of each category are exactly the same. Understand science as a human endeavor, a process, and a career. Understand science as inquiry. Understands how to use resource and research material in science. And understands the unifying process of science. Since the test creators listed these 4 specifications in every category, we can assume they're pretty important. So let's pull these out and make a 4th category. We'll call it the process of science. There, that's better. It's helpful pieces of information like that you can expect from the 240 study guide. We've done the research for you, so you can find exactly what you need to know to pass your test in our study guide. But let's go ahead and talk about some key concepts now. Each of the 3 original categories makes up about 33% of your test, so you're likely to see about 18 questions from each branch of science. Let's start from the top with Earth Science, which actually covers Earth and space science. So yeah, that means you could be asked about anything on Earth or in space. Don't hate me, I promise it's not as daunting as that. The big things you're going to see here include Earth systems, weather and atmosphere, and astronomy. So we can kind of split it into what's on Earth and what's not on Earth. Let's start close to home and stay on Earth first. This means you're going to know all the big systems and cycles on our planet and how they work. So the rock cycle, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the water cycle, and all the stuff that goes into changing land on Earth. So plate tectonics, volcanoes, and earthquakes, just to name a few. And if that sounds like a lot, you should check out our study guide where we help you through all of it. Let's take a sneak peek at what you'll see when you dive into plate tectonics. You're going to need to know the difference between the 3 types of tectonic plate boundaries. Convergent boundaries occur when 2 plates move towards each other. Divergent boundaries occur when 2 plates move away from each other. And transform boundaries occur when 2 plates slide past each other. Hey, camera guys, how do tectonic plates greet each other?
How?
They shake lands.
Nice. Yeah.
Moving on to weather and atmosphere. A big thing here is weather versus climate. Easiest way to break these 2 down is that weather is short-term, like over minutes or hours, while climate is long-term, like patterns that occur over years. And just like that, we're almost done with Earth Science. Ready to blast off? To infinity and astronomy! Lucky for you, our study guide has a video on this that is out of this world.
Okay. She's on a roll.
All right, let's check out the video.
The moon's phase depends on how much sunlight is reflected to us, which changes based on where the moon is on its orbit. There are 4 main phases, each about a week apart. New moon, which looks pretty much plain black. First quarter. Full moon, which looks fully lit. And third quarter. There are also 4 transitionary phases that occur between these points. 2 when the moon is waxing, which means the light we see is growing, and 2 when waning, which means it is shrinking. Some people remember this with wax on, wane off.
Good stuff, right? There's so much more to learn about astronomy. You could spend a bunch of time researching it all, or you could just go check it out in the study guide. Okay, let's move on to what's important to know from the life science category. Just like the earth and physical sciences, life science takes up roughly 33% of your exam. I mean, technically it would be 33.3333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333. So about 18 questions on your exam will come from category 2. And just like in earth science, we can pick out 3 big areas in this category that you need to know: structure and function of living things, genetics, and ecology. If those categories seem broad, that's because they are. You can get an entire degree in each one of them. So let's take out our microscopes and take a closer look at what you can expect to see on your test. Structure and function is all about the, well, structure and function of living things. There's a lot to cover in this section. Here are some of the biggest topics: understanding what qualifies something as alive, human body systems, and cells. But for now, let's focus on cells. There's a lot on cells. So we're talking about knowing the difference between plant and animal cells and what all the organelles inside of them do. Like how plant cells have cell walls while animal cells don't. And that the mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell. Keeping all those organelles straight can be rough, but we've got a ton of flashcards in our app that you can use to quiz yourself until you've got them down. Next up, genetics. So we're talking genes. Hey, what did one DNA strand say to the other?
I don't know, what did one?
Do these genes look good on me?
Yeah. Awesome.
Anyway, you're going to need to know how to work one of these bad boys, a Punnett square, and all the vocab that goes along with it, like the difference between dominant genes and recessive genes, and how they impact an organism's genotype and phenotype. Any organism that has at least one copy of the dominant gene will show the dominant phenotype, but an organism needs 2 copies of the recessive gene to show the recessive phenotype. And last but not least in this section is ecology. So we're leaving the lab and heading outside.
Emma, we're not heading outside literally.
Dang it, we'll just have to pretend. Because ecology is all about organisms, how they interact with each other, and how they interact with their environment. A good example of tracking these interactions is a food web. Ooh, we have a great video on this. Want to see it?
Ecosystems contain many organisms linked by food and energy relationships. Food webs show these overlapping food chains. Therefore, a food web provides a much more complex and detailed picture of how energy flows from producer to other organisms. These can be useful to determine the impact of removing a population. For example, if the frog population died out, there would be no food for the snake population, and it would also die out. Then the wolf population would have to depend more on the squirrels and birds, which might get overhunted. On the other hand, the bugs and grass the frog used to eat might have an increase in population.
Like what you saw? There are a ton more great videos just like that one in our study guide. Whew, life science, nailed it. That final 33% of your test, that comes from physical science. Like, let's get into physical science. All right, I'll save it for karaoke night. The 3 main things you'll see here are matter, force and motion, and energy. Now, I'm going to go over some amazing concrete concepts you should know. But to really get the confidence you deserve to pass the test, you need to get the 240 study guide. Our 240 study guides have hundreds of questions, in-depth videos, and test-aligned study materials so you can get the depth you need to pass. All right, let's get after it. In the matter part, you may have already guessed that you'll need to know all about the states of matter, the characteristics of a solid versus a liquid versus a gas. But there's more to it too. You'll need to know about chemical and physical properties, and you'll even see some questions about atoms and the periodic table here. In the force and motion category, you're going to need to know all about Newton's laws. So vocabulary words like inertia or how an object resists a change in motion will show up here. Which brings us to energy. Oh, kinetic and potential energy pop up here. Roll the tape.
We don't use tape, it's more digital.
You guys, you know what I meant.
Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. Anything that is moving has kinetic energy. Potential energy is stored energy and can be converted back to kinetic energy.
Guess what? We made it through all 3 sciences. But don't forget, we're not quite done talking about what's on your test. We've still got that last category that we made with those test specifications that showed up in all 3 sciences. So you'll see questions from this category sprinkled throughout your entire exam. but they still show up pretty regularly, so you're going to want to know what you're talking about. Everything in this category basically boils down to how to do science well. And two things that tend to come up a lot are lab safety and teaching science. So familiarize yourself with common lab safety rules like these. And want a good tip? When in doubt, just answer these questions using common sense. Like, don't eat or drink by chemicals, and tie back loose hair or clothing when working with flames. And last but not least, teaching science. Number one thing you need here, to know the scientific method. You didn't think we'd make it through an entire test on science without the scientific method, did you? I didn't think so. You'll need to know all the steps of the scientific method and how to do each one. But again, to really have the confidence you deserve, go subscribe to a 240 study guide. You can get the study guide for Praxis Elementary Science. Use 240 to guarantee you pass. Now that we've gone over some of the big concepts, let's take a look at some practice questions to show you how these concepts can appear on the test. Starting back with Earth science. Remember that section on Earth systems where we talked about the different kinds of boundaries? Let's look at how that's reflected in a question. Which of the following takes place at a transform plate boundary? In a transform boundary, plates always move sideways relative to each other, so this choice is correct. Let's look at one from weather and atmosphere. Climate is different than weather because weather, well, we talked earlier about how climate is long-term while weather is short-term, so that means this answer is best. Weather changes on a daily basis because heat energy, air pressure, wind, and moisture interact differently each and every day. Nice. Ready to head back to space? Which of the following moon phases occurs within the next 4 nights following a new moon? A new moon occurs when the moon is on the same side of the Earth as the sun. After a new moon, a small sliver of the bright side of the moon is visible on Earth. This sliver grows into a crescent moon within 3.5 days. An increase in the size of the bright side is called waxing. So, this answer is best. We made it through Earth science. Onward to life science. What about those tricky structure and function questions? What do those look like? Which of the following is present in plant cells, but not in animal cells? Animal cells have mitochondria, cytoplasm, and a nucleus. But only plant cells have chloroplasts. The chloroplast is the food producer of the cell. It converts light energy of the sun into sugars that can be used by the cells. Consider the following Punnett square. If capital A is dominant over lowercase a, what percentage of the offspring would be expected to show the dominant phenotype? Any organism that contains a dominant gene will show the dominant trait. 2 of the 4 boxes here contain a dominant gene, so this answer is correct. 50% of offspring would be expected to show the dominant phenotype. Last up for life science, ecology. Let's take a look at a question on food webs. An increase in the population of which of the following will most likely cause a population increase in every other level of the food chain? Producers are the plants upon which primary consumers feed. Primary consumers feed on the producers. Secondary consumers feed on the primary consumers, and so on up the food chain. All levels of the food chain are affected by population changes in the producers. So this choice is correct. We've made it through Earth science and life science. So next up, physical science. Let's throw you a tricky question on matter. Which of the following characteristics always describes a solid? Well, I know of lots of solids that aren't clear, so choice D is out. But solids are rigid, and they have a definite shape and a fixed volume. So A, B, and C are all correct. Let's do one on force and motion. A woman accidentally left her purse on top of her car and drove out of her driveway. She traveled a short distance down the road, and a deer darted out in front of her, causing her to quickly apply the brakes. When she hit the brakes, she saw her purse slide down her windshield and onto the hood of her car. Which one of Newton's laws does this scenario relate to? In this scenario, the woman's car stopped when she hit the brakes, but her purse kept moving forward. Newton's first law of motion states that an object in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by an external net force. So this is the best choice. Let's look at an energy question. A girl is sledding down a hill. At which point would she have the least potential energy? As the girl sleds down the hill, her potential energy is decreasing, and therefore it is lowest at the bottom of the hill, making this the best answer. Just those process of science questions left. Let's start with lab safety. Which of the following safety practices will be most applicable to first grade science labs? Children in first grade are unlikely to be handling dangerous chemicals, but there could still be unsafe elements that make it important not to eat or drink in the science lab. So this is the best choice. And last, but certainly not least, the scientific method. Of the following, which is most appropriate to do after testing a hypothesis? After testing a hypothesis, it is best to organize the data so that conclusions can be drawn. So this is the best choice. Now, that's just a small sliver of practice questions to give you an idea about how these concepts are assessed on the test. Congratulations on finishing the video. If you found it helpful, give it a like. There's still plenty more to learn. Did you know that we've helped thousands of teachers pass their Praxis exams? If you really want to make sure you're prepared for the Praxis Elementary Science exam, take the next step and subscribe to the 240 Study Guide. It has hours of videos, so you can watch or listen as you please. It's test aligned, so you know precisely what you need to study. And it has hundreds of practice questions, so you can be sure you're ready. And it has the money-back guarantee. So click the link below right now to get started.